Hey everybody, welcome to Storytime with Bucho. I am Bucho. Tonight I'm going to be reading another story out of my latest collection called Under a Black Rainbow, which you can find on Amazon pretty readily. I also have an author meet and greet and book signing happening here in Kansas City on April 13th. It's a Saturday at 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. at Afterward Tavern and Shelves at 19th and Grand. So here, if you're in town, swing through. It's a free event, and I'll be signing copies and just talking about the book. So if you're around, swing through. Tonight, I'm going to be reading a piece called Trauerspielen, Mourning Plays Part 2. It's not so much a story as it is like little weird violent vignettes that are kind of stitched together. I like doing them every once in a while. It's kind of like little idea fodder that comes out. And I just don't know where else to put it, and I don't really feel like expanding on it necessarily. Sometimes I feel like the really short, punchy pieces speak on their own, like a good piece of flash fiction sometimes. So I hope you enjoy. And one day we awoke, unable to breathe because the air was made of gasoline and fume. Tiny flowers with petals made of flame blossomed up from every garden and every season. We soon fertilized our lawns with the heads of matches, knowing the vivid colors of lilies and violets and roses and chrysanthemums and daisies would be replaced with angry yellows, unrelenting oranges, and maddening reds. We were lucky to find any hair on our bodies when the new year began. We were lucky all did not become ash from the dryness of the fire-licked atmosphere surrounding us, suffocating us. Soon, maybe it was the next day or the day after that or the day after that, three little sisters born of the smoke and the ash and the fire and the burn awoke on the charred floor of the charred forest. Between blackened limbs and still smoldering trunks, the girls rubbed their eyes, clawed the dirt and dust from the crevices of their eyelids, and gazed upon the rot and the ruin surrounding them. All stood, two yawned, one stretched, but soon they all set off traipsing through the fire-kissed fragility of what remained, the sound of limbs creaking and cracking and falling to the ground in violent bursts of several at a time. The echo of a great splintering could be heard for miles. They shuffled, mirthless and unsmiling, out of the forest and into the dry grassland beneath a reddened sky full of clouds the color of aged bone. Their bare feet left footprints behind them, each divot ringed in little tongues of dancing fire. The plants they touched along the way blackened, wilted, crisped up, and fell apart like so much dust. It was like watching a wave of ash consume the earth, a wide swath of gray coming to choke us where we stood. The girls walked side by side, leaving three flaming trails of prints behind them that we could see from our homes. Three soot and ash-covered girls, three trails of fire headed our way. It was then we knew we could no longer outrun all the damage we'd caused. A twilight moon pours down from the blackened autumn sky through the kitchen window. The mother takes her time and expertly sends her hands down into the soapy water of the sink to pull up another dish. She washes it, rinses it off, and places it on the drying rack on the counter beside her. The well-lit kitchen makes it difficult to see anything but her reflection in the glass, so instead she works with her head down as the father keeps watch over the children in the living room. The television is on. She cannot tell if he's watching a game or the nightly news. Their lexicons of violence seem to sound the same these days. The children are quiet, so they are either entranced by the digital imagery on the screen or they are playing nicely together, which is a rarity. Did something move out in the darkness of the backyard? She squints, unable to see anything other than the moon leering back at her. Another raccoon, perhaps. And a possum, maybe. They were forever finding evidence of both during the daytime. The mother washes her hands and begins drying the dishes and stacking them up neatly on a hand towel that's been spread out along the countertop. Soon all the dishes have been washed, rinsed, and dried. Was that more movement in the backyard she noticed out of the corner of her eye? She leans over the sink to put her face closer to the window. Her gaze roams around the exterior, still unable to see anything substantial, much less the outline of anything. Though early in the evening, it's pitch black outside. With the dishes done, she brews herself a cup of tea and sits at the dinner table by the sliding glass door that leads to the backyard. She stares out in the black, blowing the steam off the top of her mug. It doesn't strike her to turn the kitchen lights off or to simply dim them. The night is a normal one. But had she dimmed the lights or turned them off completely, she would see her backyard perfectly. She would see what she thought she'd seen a half hour previous while washing the dishes. She would see the figure of a hulking man standing in the middle of her dark backyard, simply staring back at her. He watched her as she washed the dishes, and he watches her now as she drinks her tea at the table. He is statuesque, unmoving and unblinking. In his right hand, he holds a small duffel bag while the fingers of his left hand clench and unclench, as if he is cracking old bones, as if he is fighting off arthritic pain, or as if he is simply anxious to grip something very, very tightly. They awoke to a light buzzing in their cars. An annoyance, really, but one they couldn't find the source of. Neighbors came outside at the same time, presumably to grab the morning paper, but soon they congregated in the street with confused looks plastered across each face and their eyes searching the skies for any kind of hint at its origin. By 10 a.m., the hum had gotten louder. People tried everything to block it out, sticking everything from fingers to bullets in their ears, but the hum prevailed and seemed to emanate from within the body, from within the home, from within every object found in nature if one was outside. They soon realized that wearing headphones and listening to music didn't help, as the hum distorted the sound, superseded it with a power no one could explain. The music became warbled as if played on a warped record through speakers placed underwater. By noon, you could see the physical effect the hum was taking on the populace. Nobody smiled. Each grimace was a forced one as the hum continued on, never wavering and never changing its pitch. An hour later, the hum seemed to grow louder, more menacing somehow. Would warplanes fly overhead? Was a missile strike imminent? No one knew, and by now barely anyone could stand to speak to anyone else, each voice now overtaken by the hum and made to sound warbled like the music. Whole conversations sounded like they were being held at the bottom of an ocean, each word a bit of watery wave sent out and untranslatable. Someone, because no one could remember exactly who it was later, figured out that if you simply dunked your head in water, you could avoid the effects of the hum. The water itself became panacea, a gift to those who had been awake and suffering from the hum's effects all day long. You could fill a tub and dunk your head for several minutes, but you'd have to come back out eventually. The hum would feel as if it had grown in power and menace each time, exponentially making the person feel worse. You could do the same with a bucket, but only with the same effect. Scuba gear soon flew off the shelves in local sporting goods stores, and large swaths of the population found themselves congregating at the bottoms of local pools, speaking to each other in sign language and sharing oxygen tanks with each other. But as the people would lament later when the hum died off and disappeared, some simply took this concept too far. A line of grimacing men, women, and children of all ages had marched towards local ponds and lakes on the eastern side of the city, while others marched defiantly towards the ocean to the west. With all the scuba gear gone, these people simply walked into each body of water and stayed put, relishing the sound of silence as they slowly drowned and were never heard from again until their bodies were pulled out of each body of water. The hum stopped just before midnight that night and never returned, but no one ever found the source of its menacing nature. I am the slither and the slink, the feel of beak crushing fragile carapace. I am the silent movement of thousands of tiny legs propelling the curved body of the caterpillar across aphid ruined leaves. I am the crisp of autumn, the whisper of leaves dying on the limb before spiraling toward their earthly demise. I am the stem and the thorn, the petal and the invisible pollution slowly wilting bloom. I am the simmering sound of fire smoldering bright inside the cavities of petrified trees, the groan of charred limbs forever reaching to the sky above. I am the decay, the dirt, and the fungi, the maggot burrow in a slain creature's skin. I am the skin eroded and the skin chewed, the last breath taken as the eyes go blank. I am the sound of life silenced, of blood halted in the veins, a final flicker of whisker in the still air. I am the howl echoed across valley, the sound of paws engaged in hunt, the growl of muzzle against muzzle, the steaming red on tooth and nail during snowfall. I am the random spatter of life across perfect white, the red stain of battle soaking into the near-frozen ground. I am the impermanence of life and the certitude of death, that which stalks you in your sleep at night while you protect your cubs. I am the ambivalence of midnight. I am the dark. Ash fell like snowfall for weeks. It coated the sidewalks and bus stops and stoplights while also clogging up the drains in black gummy messes. People walked faster to work, walked faster going home. Rooms and hallways were turned into areas for cleaning and de-ashing, though the ash would never go away completely. All was covered in a dusty patina. Plastic film was affixed to windows and patio doors in attempts to keep the air quality as fresh as possible. This lasted until the outdoor units became clogged themselves and began sucking in the ash and sending it through the ductwork, smogging up whole homes and buildings. Everything tasted of ash. There was no escaping the thickness of the air, the density of every breath through the face masks, a reminder, as if the constant falling ash wasn't enough. It was perpetual fog without all the romance. Every breath a labored one, every breath saved so there was no waste. Pleasantries stopped being exchanged, and we began to communicate in clumsy sign language, signaling our wants and desires, describing news upon the air between us as our fingernails grayed and dirtied from the movement. Better them than our lungs, we thought. Better for our nails to capture the grime than to let it build up inside our hearts, though the ash had found a way to make a home in plenty of those, too. The words of every argument we ever had were carved into the visible skin of her arms and legs with ink made in part of her tears. Each word, barbed with anger, left a bright sliver of that red that ballooned maroon and trickled down, pooled up on the floor or counter on bed sheets below the affected area. Each real apology or phrase bathed in honest truth became a salve, closing wounds slowly as the blood was sucked back below the surface. Each phrase devoid of honesty spread each wound a little wider, split closed ones back open, she biting her lip to keep the screams from coming. Bandages soaked through quickly, I'm ashamed to admit. So many articles of her clothing became ruined, spoiled by stain. She tried to fill our closet with clothing only made of darkest red, but still the stains remained visible and embarrassing. We then filled the racks with clothes all black and found this to be sufficient until we could figure out a way to make the bleeding stop. I even took on a vow of silence, writing down or typing out my parts in conversation, only to find that the wounds didn't care. They opened, spread, and bled the same as if I'd screamed the words direct into her ears. I duct taped my mouth shut and tied my hands to my sides so I could assume complete silence, but even a single shake of the head in disagreement gave way to her wincing in pain. We ate in silence every night until I'd finally had enough, had finally decided that this new normal of ours was unacceptable. I stood up from the table, gathered my few belongings, kissed her on the cheek, and simply left. I walked down the block to the bus stop. The sky taunted rain, sprinkles dotting my shirt and hands as I waited for the next bus to arrive out of the darkening evening. My pocket vibrated over and over, but I couldn't yet bring myself to answer the phone, much less look at it. I imagined my voicemail filling up with rage-filled litanies of anger at my leaving, the sound of all the life we'd created together being thrown around and broken in the background. I imagined her voice as black tendrils snaking out from the receiver and into my ear, wrapping around my brain to strangle it tight. Eventually the bus arrived, so too the rain shortly after. My pocket continued to vibrate until I took my seat and allowed myself time to adjust to my wet clothes, to the slow lumbering jostle of the bus, to the reality of what I've just done. I pulled the phone out of my pocket and stared at the screen. 15 missed calls, 33 new texts, 4 voicemails. If I responded, would I put her in more pain? Were I to break my silence, how many places would her skin break open in protest? Rather than call back, I decided listening to the voicemails would only cause one of us any pain, me. Message 1. Where have you gone? What have you done? Indecipherable. Sobbing. Click. Message 2. Please, M. Please come back. I don't want you to go. Click. Message 3. I understand why you've left, but please come back to me. I would rather have you silent than not at all. Click. Message 4. The entirety of the message is a string of breathless, weepy I love yous. It is a sonic wall of regret and anguish that cannot be ignored. The phrase is repeated over and over again until the message finally ends of its own accord, The mailbox is full. It is the final message that ruins me the most. I can almost hear the panic in her heartbeat, a sound that thrums beneath her voice like the morning drums of war gearing up for battle. My heart swells and my face crumples into an ugly thing fraught with pride and sadness. To return to ask this bus to stop, to let me off, and to march back to her in the rain while romantic takes every fiber of my being to fight against. To return would be certain pain to her, morning to night, every day. I would be the cause. No matter how hard I fought against it, no matter how many precautions we might take, it is as sure as death. I could no longer be the cause of every wound, old or new, exploding open in new pains spreading out from the healing skin. Surely it would be better for us to part, to find ourselves on opposite sides of the world, never to stumble into each other randomly ever again. I could not return purely to re-experience the feel of her hair tickling my chest as we slept through the morning. I could not return to try and embed that memory more deeply than it already was. I grabbed what I could, memories and all, knowing full well what had to be done. I put the phone back in my pocket. It continued to vibrate. The rain fell harder outside. The streets glistened in neon and stoplight. The slow, lumbering jostle of the bus took me to the city limits, took me beyond the city limits. And still, the phone vibrated. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully I will have more updates for you soon.